Well, hello everyone. It's absolutely wonderful to be here at this inaugural day. I'd like to talk to you about some research I did in New Zealand with the Royal New Zealand Foundation of the Blind Guide Dog Services, where I looked at the relationship people had with their guide dogs. I'm going to talk to you today about the relationship specifically with the first dogs. Okay, so guide dog schools around the world, they pay a great deal of attention to matching dogs to the handlers or the owners, but some matches don't work and some people do return their dogs. So this presentation I'll talk about the relationship of 50 people with their first dogs and measuring overall compatibility with their dogs as perceived by the guide dog owners or handlers. And that's basically not just mobility, but on social issues as well, so lots of non-mobility issues, and just identify some factors that influence the success or the failure of these first dogs. Okay, so just some definitions. Matching's really complicated, but it can be fairly simply defined, and that's finding the most suitable guide dog possible for a particular individual, and the goal is to get that right the first time. Compatibility I defined as the behavioural, physical and the psychological fit of the team. So the success of the dog, it's not just dependent on the dog's ability to safely guide an individual through objects efficiently, it's contingent on a whole host of factors. Like I mentioned, the problem is that although guide dog schools they pay a great deal of attention, mismatches do occur, and this is very distressing for guide dog users, but it's also difficult for guide dog schools because of the time and the effort to get these dogs to the stage of actually matching to an owner. Okay, so I spent quite a lot of time talking to guide dog instructors right across Australia, the UK, around the world really, America. I went to a lot of conferences and talked to people. There's not very much in the literature, if any, on this topic. So I came up with some kind of broad categories that guide dog instructors told me they felt impacted the match. So things like people's motivation to get a dog, height-weight ratio depending on the size of the dog that's used, what their mobility needs were, whether they have very limited or very extensive needs, what people expected a dog would do for them, how well they could control the dog, their visual status, different kinds of visual impairments, health, age, other disabilities, working, living environment, orientation and mobility, or O&M skills, and just personalities and preferences. So matching is an art as much as a science, and there's probably no such thing as finding a perfect match. But I did find this one, it's also very difficult. Sometimes people probably can't be matched very well. And that's backed up by Robson's statement in '85, which is the only paper I could find in the literature on the matching process at this time. And he said, it may be determined that a person's mental or physical characteristics are such that it would be impossible to match him or her with any canine, let alone one optimally suited to his or her individual characteristics and environment. But since then, I do believe that guide dog schools, they are matching many, many more dogs to many, many more people with different abilities and skills. Okay, so measures that I used, I interviewed people and I asked them if the partnerships had ceased, and if so, what was the main reason why. Looked at demographics and visual status. So to assess functional vision, it was very simple. I just asked people, do you think you have any useful vision, some useful vision, or a lot? And because there was no measure in the literature, I created a guide dog compatibility index. So this was a measure of 10 items on this scale to measure overall compatibility. So a 1 to 10 scale, and higher scores indicated greater compatibility. And I did test all the items to look at internal consistency and to make sure that the items were all actually measuring the same underlying variable of compatibility. And the Cronbach alpha score was very high, so indicating that it had good internal consistency. So these items were need for a dog, motivation to get one, person's ability to control the dog, how emotionally attached they felt to the dog, like-minded, that's sort of a bit airy-fairy, but more like in tune with this dog, dog's effect on mobility and on their social interactions, dog as a companion, general satisfaction, and overall satisfaction with the match. Okay. So in my sample of these 50 guide dog users, fairly evenly distributed between the sexes, this again, we're just talking about first dogs. I did look at lots of dogs in the sample later on and got some similar and different results, but for this sample, age range from 17, and that's a little typo, I apologise, it should say 75 years of age, that people actually got their first guide dog with a mean of about 38 years. Some people, when I interviewed them, were on their first guide dog, but some people had used as many as 8 dogs. First dogs were used from about a month to 11 and a half years, with a mean of 6 years of usage. So most people might get their, it's very depending on the dog's breed, but perhaps 18 months for people to get their first dog, age of the dog that is, to 2 years. People who thought their dogs were mismatched, they used in this sample their dogs for an average of 2 years. People told me that 60% of them had no useful vision, 30% had some, and 10% they felt they had a lot. Okay, so I asked various research questions. I'm not going to read these because I'll go through them very quickly in this talk, but this is the questions I asked to explore the first dog data set. So how many dogs were rejected and why? So in this sample, 16% of dogs were rejected, and by rejection I mean they were sent back. This figure is the fate of all the first guide dogs, and you can see that most dogs actually, does this mouse work? No. Okay, well, the retired of old age and retired of health was the fate of most dogs in this sample. For the dogs that were rejected, and we're just talking tiny numbers here, it's just a little indication here. Most were rejected for dog distraction and dog aggression while working, followed by some specific guiding tasks like the speed of the dog. Equally with dogs that were rejected for social behaviours. When I looked at the entire dog sample, the results for rejection were actually quite similar to these small numbers. So there's probably something in that. So is there a relationship between the sex of the participants and whether or not dogs were rejected? So I did all the appropriate statistics, and no, there was no difference between the number of males and females that rejected dogs. Next question, relationship between the age of the participants and whether or not they rejected dogs, and I didn't find any significant results there either, so probably not an influence of age. I did an analysis on interaction effects to see if one actually affected the other, and there was no combination effects between age and sex on overall compatibility. So is compatibility associated with whether or not dogs were rejected? And not surprisingly, really, there was a moderate degree of correlation, indicating that higher levels of compatibility were corresponded with a much less likely outcome of people sending the dogs back. Okay, so I looked at if the degree of self-professed useful vision was associated with compatibility. And this table shows group 1 is the group with no useful vision, group 2 with some useful vision, and group 3 with a lot. And there's actually a statistically significant difference between those groups, with people who say they have some useful vision saying that they're more compatible with their dogs, and people who have a lot of useful vision being less compatible with their dogs. So I looked at the scale itself, and I wondered about, well, how well do these individual items of this guide dog compatibility index predict overall matching success? So I used the item 10, the match itself, as the dependent variable. I did a regression analysis to look at the model as the overall model, but also the individual contributions. And I found that need for a dog, motivation for a dog, how attached people felt they were to their dogs, and companionship actually didn't correlate with the outcome of the matching success. I also took out satisfaction because it correlated too highly. And that left me with a different model, which just contained control, like-mindedness, dogs' effect on mobility, and dogs' effect on social interactions as well. So I thought, well, how much of the variance in overall matching success can be explained by this new adjusted model? And it actually turned out to be a very respectable outcome, 68.4%. Those 4 variables kind of answer it covers all the things that go into matching success, so that's actually quite high. Okay. So then I wanted to look, well, which particular item might be the best predictor, and I did a different kind of analysis there, and the results showed that each of these 4 items made a significant, statistically significant, but also a unique contribution to matching success. So they do appear to be reliable predictors of the outcome. So in order of the highest significance value, that was the dog's effect on mobility, person's ability to control that dog, this like-mindedness, but also social. Social was really quite important. People sent dogs back if they didn't behave well socially. They could be very good mobility aids, but if they didn't behave in the office environment or behave when they went to parties, then this was a very important reason for dogs to actually be rejected. Okay, so in conclusion, the majority of handler and first guide dog relationships were successful. The reason that work ceased in order of decreasing magnitude was the dogs retired of old age, they retired of ill health, or an unsuitable match. They were rejected in this sample for distraction, aggression to other dogs while working, and then equally with specific guiding tasks and social behaviour. Okay, level of compatibility does appear to be associated with matching success. Age and sex of the handler didn't appear to make a difference. There was an association between compatibility and amount of useful vision, and if somebody wants to ask me that question later, I'll be happy to try and answer it, and it's great to have Paul Adrian here because he might be able to help me answer that. And good predictors of matching success appear to be the dog's effects on mobility, the handler's ability to control the dog, this like-mindedness between person and dog, and the dog's effects on social interactions. Okay, so I would like to thank the people and the dogs that took part in this study. Staff at Guide Dog Services and the Australian Guide Dog Schools that taught me a lot about this area, and Douglas Pharmaceuticals sponsored this project, so that was cool. And I'm just going to finish with this one slide of, this is Marie Pilbro and Guide Dog Arissa, and Marie gave me permission to use this slide, and she got Arissa when she was 75 years of age, and that was her first guide dog. And she said to me, I wanted to be more independent and I expected that getting a dog would give me more freedom, but when I got Arissa, I felt like a little bird being let out of its cage. It's wonderful. And that's me. Thank you.